Hello, welcome back to Teen Story Share. This week we're going to be starting a brand new book for the month of December, and it is The Best Christmas Pageant Ever by Barbara Robinson. And we're going to read the first 2 chapters today, and next Friday we'll read 2 more. And after that we do take a holiday break, and story times will start back up again in January. This book is kind of a classic and it's very funny. Oh, but by the way, this book in the first chapter, it does have a lot of use of the word fat and making fun of people who are fat, because that is something that one of the kids in the book does to be mean to people. So just so you know, in case that's something that might bother you. The Herdmans were absolutely the worst kids in the history of the world. They lied and stole and smoked cigars, even the girls, and talked dirty and hit little kids and cussed their teachers and took the name of the Lord in vain and set fire to Fred Shoemaker's old broken down tool house. The tool house burned right down to the ground, and I think that surprised the Herdmans. They set fire to things all the time, but that was the first time they managed to burn down a whole building. I guess it was an accident. I don't suppose they woke up that morning and said to one another, "Let's go burn down Fred Shoemaker's tool house." But maybe they did. After all, it was a Saturday and not much going on. It was a terrific fire. 2 engines and 2 police cars and all the volunteer firemen and 5 dozen donuts set up from the tasty lunch diner. The donuts were supposed to be for the firemen, but by the time they got the fire out, the donuts were all gone. The Herdmans got them. What they couldn't eat, they stuffed in their pockets and down the front of their shirts. You could actually see the donuts all around Ollie Herdman's middle. I couldn't understand why the Herdmans were hanging around the scene of their crime. Everybody knew the whole thing was their fault, and you'd think they'd have the brains to get out of sight. One fireman even collared Claude Herdman and said, "Did you kids start this fire? Smoking cigars in that tool house?" But Claude just said, "We weren't smoking cigars." And they weren't. They were playing with Leroy Herdman's Young Einstein chemistry set, which he stole from the hardware store, and that was how they started the fire. Leroy said so. "We mixed all the little powders together," he said, "and poured lighter fluid around on them, and set fire to the lighter fluid. We wanted to see if the chemistry set was any good." Any other kid, even a mean kid, would have been a little bit worried if he stole $4.95 worth of something and then burned down a building with it. But Leroy was just mad because the chemistry set got burned up along with everything else, before he had a chance to make 1 or 2 bombs. The fire chief got us all together. There were 15 or 20 kids standing around watching the fire, and gave us a little talk about playing with matches and gasoline and dangerous things like that. "I don't say that's what happened here," he told us. "I don't know what happened here, but that could have been it, and you see the result. So let this be a good lesson to you, boys and girls." Of course, it was a great lesson to the Herdmans. They learned that wherever there's a fire, there will be free donuts sooner or later. I guess things would have been different if they'd burned down, say, the Second Presbyterian Church instead of the tool house. But the tool house was about to fall down anyway. All the neighbors had pestered Mr. Shoemaker to do something about it because it looked so awful and was sure to bring rats. So everybody said the fire was a blessing in disguise, and even Mr. Shoemaker said it was a relief. My father said it was the only good thing the Herdmans ever did, and if they'd known it was a good thing, they wouldn't have done it at all. They would have set fire to something else, or somebody. They were just so all-around awful, you could hardly believe they were real. Ralph, Imogen, Leroy, Claude, Ollie, and Gladys. 6 skinny, stringy-haired kids, all alike except for being different sizes, and having different black and blue places where they had clonked each other. They lived over a garage at the bottom of Sproul Hill. Nobody used the garage anymore, but the Herdmans used to bang the door up and down just as fast as they could and try to squash one another. That was their idea of a game. Where other people had grass in their front yard, the Herdmans had rocks. And where other people had hydrangea bushes, the Herdmans had poison ivy. There was also a sign in the yard that said, Beware of the cat. New kids always laughed about it till they got a look at the cat. It was the meanest looking animal I ever saw. It had one short leg and a broken tail and one missing eye, and the mailman wouldn't deliver anything to the herdmans because of it. I don't think it's a regular cat at all, the mailman told my father. I think those kids went up in the hills and caught themselves a bobcat. Oh, I don't think you can tame a wild bobcat, my father said. I'm sure you can't, said the mailman. They'd never try to tame it. They'd just try to make it wilder than it was to begin with. If that was their plan, it worked. The cat would attack anything it could see out of its one eye. One day, Claude Herdman emptied the whole first grade in 3 minutes flat when he took the cat to show and tell. He didn't feed it for 2 days, so it was already mad, and then he carried it to school in a box. Claude Herdman emptied the whole first grade in 3 minutes flat when he took the cat to show and tell. He didn't feed it for 2 days, so it was already mad, and then he carried it to school in a box, and when he opened the box, the cat shot right out. He didn't feed it for 2 days, so it was already mad, and then he carried it to school in a box, and when he opened the box, the cat shot out, right straight up in the air, people said. It came down on the top blackboard ledge and clawed 4 big long scratches all the way down the blackboard. Then it just tore around all over the place, scratching little kids and shedding fur and scattering books and papers everywhere. The teacher, Miss Brandell, yelled for everybody to run out in the hall, and she pulled a coat over her head and grabbed a broom and tried to corner the cat. But of course she couldn't see with the coat over her head, so she just ran up and down the aisles hollering, "Here, kitty!" and smacking the broom down wherever the cat hissed back. She knocked over the Happy Family dollhouse and a globe of the world, and even broke the aquarium full of 20 gallons of water and about 65 goldfish. All the time she kept yelling for Claude to come and catch his cat, but Claude had gone out in the hall with the rest of the class. Later, when Miss Brandell was slapping band-aids on everyone who could show her any blood, she asked Claude why in the world he didn't come and get his cat under control. "You told us to go out in the hall," Claude said, just as if he were the ordinary kind of first grader who did whatever teachers said to do. There's the teacher, trying to get the cat. And forgot to show you this one. Here are the horrible herdmans. The cat settled down a bit once it got something to eat, most of the goldfish and Ramona Billion's 2 pet mice that she brought to show and tell. Ramona cried and carried on so, "I can't even bury them," she said, that they sent her home. The room was a wreck, broken glass and papers and books and puddles of water and dead goldfish everywhere. Miss Brandell was sort of a wreck too, and most of the first graders were hysterical, so somebody took them outdoors and let them have recess for the rest of the day. Claude took the cat home, and after that, there was a rule that you couldn't bring anything alive to show and tell. The herdmans moved from grade to grade through the Woodrow Wilson School like those South American fish that strip your bones clean in 3 minutes flat, which was just about what they did to one teacher after another. But they never got kept back in a grade. When it came time for Claude Herdman to pass to the 2nd grade, he didn't know his ABCs, or his numbers, or his colors, or his shapes, or his 3 bears, or how to get along with anybody. But Miss Brandell passed him anyway. For one thing, she knew she'd have Ollie Herdman the next year. That was the thing about the Herdmans. There was always another one coming along, and no teacher was crazy enough to let herself in for 2 of them at once. I was always in the same grade with Imogen Herdman, and what I did was try to stay out of her way. It wasn't easy to stay out of her way. You couldn't do it if you were very pretty, or very ugly, or very smart, or very dumb, or had anything unusual about you, like red hair or double-jointed thumbs. But if you were sort of a medium kid like me, and kept your mouth shut when the teacher said, "Who can name all 50 states?" you had a pretty good chance to stay clear of Imogen. As far as anyone could tell, Imogen was just like the rest of the Herdmans. She never learned anything either, except dirty words and secrets about everybody. Twice a year, we had to go to the health room to get weighed and measured, and Imogen always managed to find out exactly what everybody weighed. Sometimes she would hang around waiting for the nurse, Miss Hemphill, to give her a Band-Aid. Sometimes she would sneak behind the curtain where they kept a folding cot, and just stay there the whole time with one eye on the scales. "Why are you still here, Imogen?" Miss Hemphill asked one day. "You can go back to your room." "I think you better look and see if I've got what Ollie has." "What does Ollie have?" Imogen shrugged. "We don't know. Red spots all over." Miss Hemphill looked at her. "What did the doctor say?" "We didn't have a doctor." Imogen began scrunching her back up and down against the medicine cabinet. "Well, does Ollie have a fever? Is he in bed?" "No, he's in the 1st grade." "Right now?" Miss Hemphill stared. "Why, he shouldn't be in school with red spots. It could be measles or chicken pox or any number of contagious things. What are you doing?" "Scratching my back," Imogen said. "Boy, do I itch." "The rest of you boys and girls go back to your classroom," Miss Hemphill said. "And Imogen, you stay right here." So we all went back to our room, and Miss Hemphill went to the 1st grade to look at Ollie, and Imogen stayed in the health room and copied down everybody's weight from Miss Hemphill's records. Your weight was supposed to be a big secret, like what you got on your report card. "It's nobody's business what you get on your report card," all the teachers said, and Miss Hemphill said the same thing. "It's nobody's business what you weigh." But Imogen always knew. "Don't let Albert Pelfrey on the swing," she would yell at recess. "He'll bust it. Albert Pelfrey weighs 143 pounds. Last time he weighed 137. So right away, everybody knew 2 things about Albert. We knew exactly how much he weighed, and we also knew that he was getting heavier all the time. "You have to go to fat camp this summer," Imogen hollered at him. "Miss Hemphill wrote it down on your paper." Fat camp is a place where they feed you lettuce and grapefruit and cottage cheese and eggs for a month, and you either give up and cheat or give up and get skinny. "I am not," Albert said. "I'm going to Disneyland with my Uncle Frank." "That's what you think," Imogen told him. Albert had to believe her. She was always right about things like that. So all year he had fat camp to look forward to instead of Disneyland. Sometimes Imogen would blackmail kids if they had anything she wanted, like Wanda Pierce's charm bracelet. It had 22 charms, and every single one did something. The little wheels turned, or the little bitty piano keys went plink, or the little tiny drawers opened and closed. Wanda was a rich kid, so every time you turned around, she had a new charm. "Look at my new charm," she would say. "It cost $6.95 without the tax. It's a bird, and when you push this little knob, its wings flutter. It costs $6.95. They were great charms, but everybody got sick of hearing about them, so it was almost a relief when Imogen blackmailed her out of it. "I know how much you weigh, Wanda," Imogen told her. "I wrote it down on this piece of paper. See?" It must have been an awful amount, because even Wanda looked horrified. So Imogen got her charm bracelet, and she got Lucille Golden's imitation alligator pocketbook with "Souvenir of Florida" written on it. For a while, she got 10 cents a week from Floyd Brush, till Floyd caught double pneumonia and lost 15 pounds and didn't care anymore. My friend Alice Wendelkin was so nasty clean that she had detergent hands by the time she was 4 years old. Just the same, Alice picked up a case of head lice when she was at summer camp, and somehow Imogen found out about that. She would sneak up on Alice at recess and holler, "Cooties!" and smack Alice's head. She nearly knocked Alice cross-eyed before one of the teachers saw her and took both of them in to the principal. "Now, what's all this all about?" the principal wanted to know, but Alice wouldn't say. "I had to hit her," Imogen told him. "She's got cooties, and I saw one crawling in her hair, and I don't want them on me." "You did not see one," Alice said. "I don't have them anymore." "What do you mean you don't have them anymore?" the principal said. "Did you have them lately?" It really shook him up. He didn't want a whole school full of kids with cooties. So he sent Alice to the health room, and the nurse went all through her head with a fine-tooth comb and a magnifying glass and finally said it was all right. But it was too late. Everybody called Alice Cooties for the whole rest of the year. If Imogen didn't know a secret about a person, she would make one up. She would catch you in the girls' room or out in the hall and whisper, "I know what you did." And then you'd go crazy trying to figure out what it was you did that Imogen knew about. It was no good trying to get secrets on the Herdmans. Everybody already knew about the awful things they did. You couldn't even tease them about their parents or holler, "Your father's in jail," because they didn't care. Actually, they didn't know what their father was, or where he was, or anything about him, because when Gladys was 2 years old, he climbed on a railroad train and disappeared. Nobody blamed him. Now and then, you'd see Mrs. Herdman walking the cat on a length of chain around the block. But she worked double shifts at the shoe factory and wasn't home much. My mother's friend, Miss Phillips, was a social service worker, and she tried to get some welfare money for the Herdmans, so Mrs. Herdman could just work one shift and spend more time with her children. But Mrs. Herdman wouldn't do it. She liked the work, she said. "It's not the work," Miss Phillips told my mother, "and it's not the money. It's just that she'd rather be at the shoe factory than shut up at home with that crowd of kids." She sighed. I can't say I blame her. So the Herdmans pretty much looked after themselves. Ralph looked after Imogen, and Imogen looked after Leroy. And Leroy looked after Claude, and so on down the line. The Herdmans were like most big families. The big ones taught the little ones everything they knew, and the proof of that was that the meanest Herdman of all was Gladys, the youngest. We figured they were headed straight for hell, by way of the state penitentiary, until they got themselves mixed up with the church, and my mother, and our Christmas pageant. Chapter 2. Mother didn't expect to have anything to do with the Christmas pageant, except to make me and my little brother Charlie be in it. We didn't want to. And to make my father go and see it. He didn't want to. Every year he said the same thing. "I've seen the Christmas pageant." "You haven't seen this year's pageant," Mother would tell him. "Charlie is a shepherd this year." "Charlie was a shepherd last year." "No, you go on and go. I'm just going to put on my bathrobe and sit by the fire and relax. There's never anything different about the Christmas pageant." "There's something different this year," Mother said. "What?" "Charlie is wearing your bathrobe." So that year my father went. To see his bathrobe, he said. Actually, he went every year, but it was always a struggle, and Mother said that was her contribution to the Christmas pageant, getting my father to go to it. But then she got stuck with the whole thing when Mrs. George Armstrong fell and broke her leg. We knew about this as soon as it happened, because Mrs. Armstrong only lived a block and a half away. We heard the siren and saw the ambulance and watched the policemen carry her out of the house on a stretcher. "Call Mr. Armstrong at his work," she yelled at the policeman. "Shut off the stove under my potatoes. Inform the ladies' aid that I won't be at the meeting." One of the neighbor women called out, "Helen, are you in much pain?" And Mrs. Armstrong yelled back, "Yes, terrible! Don't let those children tear up my privet hedge." Even in pain, Mrs. Armstrong could still give orders. She was so good at giving orders that she was just naturally the head of anything she belonged to. And at church, she did everything but preach. Most of all, she ran the Christmas pageant every year, and here she was, 2 weeks before Thanksgiving, flat on her back. "I don't know what they'll do now about the pageant," Mother said. But the pageant wasn't the only problem. Mrs. Armstrong was also chairman of the Ladies' Aid Bazaar and coordinator of the Women's Society Potluck Supper, and there was a lot of telephoning back and forth to see who would take over those jobs. Mother had a list of names, and while she was calling people about the Ladies' Aid Bazaar, Mrs. Homer McCarthy was trying to call Mother about the potluck supper. But Mrs. McCarthy got somebody else to do that, and Mother got somebody else to do the bazaar, so the only thing left was the Christmas pageant. And Mother got stuck with that. "I could run the potluck supper with one hand tied behind my back," Mother told us. "All you have to do is make sure everybody doesn't bring meatloaf. But the Christmas pageant—" Our Christmas pageant isn't what you'd call 4-star entertainment. Mrs. Armstrong breaking her leg was the only unexpected thing that ever happened to it. The script is standard: the inn, the stable, the shepherds, the star, and so are the costumes, and so is the casting. Primary kids are angels, intermediate kids are shepherds, big boys are wise men. Elmer Hopkins, the minister's son, has been Joseph for as long as I can remember, and my friend Alice Wendelkin is Mary because she's so smart, so neat and clean, and most of all, so holy looking. All the rest of us are the angel choir, lined up according to height because nobody can sing parts. As a matter of fact, nobody can sing. We're strictly a no-talent outfit except for a girl named Alberta Bottles, who whistles. Last year, Alberta whistled "What Child Is This" for a change of pace, but nobody liked it, especially Mrs. Bottles, because Alberta put too much into it and ran out of air, and passed out cold on the manger in the middle of the third verse. Aside from that, though, it's always just the Christmas story, year after year, with people shuffling around in bathrobes and bedsheets and sharp wings. "Well," my father said once Mother got put in charge of it, "here's your big chance. Why don't you cancel the pageant and show movies?" "Movies of what?" Mother said. "I don't know. Fred Stamper has 5 big reels of Yellowstone National Park." "What does Yellowstone National Park have to do with Christmas?" Mother asked. "I know a good movie," Charlie said. "We had it at school. It shows a heart operation and 2 kids got sick." "Never mind," Mother said. "I guess you all think you're pretty funny, but the Christmas pageant is a tradition, and I don't plan to do anything different." Of course, nobody even thought about the Herdmans in connection with the Christmas pageant. Most of us spent all week in school being pounded and poked and pushed around by Herdmans, and we looked forward to Sunday as a real day of rest. Once a month, the whole Sunday school would go to church for the first 15 minutes of the service and do something special, sing a song or act out a parable or recite Bible verses. Usually the little kids sang "Jesus Loves Me," which was all they were up to. But when my brother Charlie was in with the little kids, his teacher thought up something different to do. She had everybody write down on a piece of paper what they liked best about Sunday school, or draw a picture of what they liked best. And when we all got into church, she stood up in front of the congregation and said, "Today some of our youngest boys and girls are going to tell you what Sunday school means to them. Betsy, what do you have on your paper?" Betsy Cathcart stood up and said, "What I like best about Sunday school is the good feeling I get when I go there." I don't think she wrote that down at all, but it sounded terrific, of course. One kid said he liked hearing all the Bible stories. Another kid said, "I like learning songs about Jesus." 8 or 9 little kids stood up and said what they liked, and it was always something good about Jesus or God or cheerful friends or the nice teacher. Finally, the teacher said, "I think we have time for one more. Charlie, what can you tell us about Sunday school?" My little brother Charlie stood up, and he didn't even have to look at his piece of paper. "What I like best about Sunday school," he said, "is that there aren't any Herdmans here." Well, the teacher should have stuck with "Jesus Loves Me," because everybody forgot all the nice churchy things the other kids said, and just remembered what Charlie said about the Herdmans. When we went to pick him up after church, his teacher told us, "I am sure there are many things Charlie likes about Sunday school. Maybe he will tell you what some of them are." She smiled at all of us, but you could tell she was really mad. On the way home, I asked Charlie, "What are some of the other things that you like that she was talking about?" He shrugged. "I like all the other stuff, but what she said to write down was what we liked best. And what I like best is no Herdmans." "Not a very Christian sentiment," my father said. "Maybe not, but it's a very practical one," Mother told him. Last year, Charlie had spent the whole 2nd grade being black and blue because he had to sit next to Leroy Herdman. In the end, it was Charlie's fault that the Herdmans showed up in church. For 3 days in a row, Leroy Herdman stole the dessert from Charlie's lunchbox, and finally, Charlie just gave up trying to do anything about it. "Oh, go on and take it," he said. "I don't care. I get all the dessert I want in Sunday school." Leroy wanted to know more about that. "What kind of dessert?" he said. "Chocolate cake," Charlie told him, "and candy bars, and cookies, and Kool-Aid. We get refreshments all the time, all we want." "You're a liar," Leroy said. Leroy was right. We got jelly beans at Easter and punch and cookies on Children's Day, and that was it. "We get ice cream too," Charlie went on, "and donuts and popcorn balls." "Who gives it to you?" Leroy wanted to know. "The minister," Charlie said. He didn't know who else to say. Of course, that was the wrong thing to tell herdmans if you wanted them to stay away. And sure enough, the very next Sunday, there they were, slouching into Sunday school, eyes peeled for refreshments. "Where do you get the cake?" Ralph asked the Sunday school superintendent, and Mr. Grady said, "Well, son, I don't know about any cake, but they're collecting the food packages out in the kitchen." What he meant was the canned stuff we brought in every year as a Thanksgiving present for the orphans' home. It was just our bad luck that the herdmans picked that Sunday to come, because when they saw all the cans of spaghetti and beans and grape drink and peanut butter, they figured there might be some truth to what Charlie said about refreshments, so they stayed. They didn't sing any hymns or say any prayers, but they did make a little money, because I saw Imogen snake a handful of coins out of the collection basket when it went past her. At the end of the morning, Mr. Grady came to every class and made an announcement. "We'll be starting rehearsals soon for our Christmas pageant," he said, "and next week after the service, we'll all gather in the back of the church to decide who will play the main roles. But, of course, we want every boy and girl in our Sunday school to take part in the pageant, so be sure your parents know that you'll be staying a little later next Sunday." Mr. Grady made this same speech every year, so he didn't get any wild applause. Besides, as I said, we all knew what part we were going to play anyway. Alice Wendelkin must have been a little bit worried, though, because she turned around to me with this sticky smile on her face and said, "I hope you're going to be in the angel choir again. You're so good in the angel choir." What she meant was, "I hope you won't get to be Mary just because your mother's running the pageant." She didn't have to worry. I didn't want to be Mary. I didn't want to be in the angel choir either, but everybody had to be something. All of a sudden, Imogen Herdman dug me in the ribs with her elbow. She has the sharpest elbows of anybody I ever knew. "What's the pageant?" she asked. "It's a play," I said. And for the first time that day, except when she saw the collection basket, Imogen looked interested. All the Herdmans are big movie-goers, though they never pay their own way. One or two of them start a fight at the box office of the theater, while the others slip in. They get their popcorn the same way, and then they spread out all over the place so the manager can never find them all before the picture's over. "What's the play about?" Imogen asked. "It's about Jesus," I said. "Everything here is," she muttered. So I figured Imogen didn't care much about the Christmas pageant. But I was wrong. Alright, we will read the next 2 chapters next week. I hope you have a great weekend. Thanks for joining me. Bye!